And we're live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Brushfire Mind. My name is Christopher Lowry, and I have Rod, Kate, and Cameron with us this evening. We're going to be talking about rites of passage. So, once upon a while ago, when it was time for a little boy to be a man, something happened. He didn't just suddenly get hairier. He didn't just all of a sudden go from boy-sized to man-sized. No, he had to do something. He had to walk on fire, or he had to go and kill an animal or something. Now, as we've developed socially, as our societies have gotten more and more complex and actually hunting has become less necessary for people in general, as we've developed, one might say, progressed, those rites of passage have progressed as well. They've changed over time. But of late, the last several decades, they've been fading. They've been going away more and more and more. Now you almost have to be involved in some sort of a fraternity type organization, military, marching band, a sports club. You have to be involved in something other than just your tribe, as it were, before you ever get near a real rite of passage. And even in those sacred institutions, that rite of passage is becoming less and less available. They're being weeded out. In the Army, for example, basic combat training used to be much harder. You know, weeks and weeks without being able to call home. You could write letters if you could carve out the time. So you were cut off from the world, and the work of getting through and graduating basic combat training was much more difficult. Even when I went in, which was only a dozen years ago, it was more difficult. It was more complicated, more difficult than it is now. At least then they took our damn cell phones away from us. They don't do that anymore. And the drill sergeants have to they have to try and curb their enthusiasm and not cuss too much, not use the F word too much, and treat these little soldiers like they have feelings. And I just remember one of my drill sergeants telling me, I hate doing this shit. If the Army thought you needed feelings, they'd have issued them to you. I didn't get a box of feelings. I got a box of boots. I got a rifle. That's what we did. All that's changing. All that's going away. And as these rites of passage become more and more a thing of the past, so do men in general. Strong, manly men. And part of what we're going to explore in this conversation is this. A nation without real men, strong, labor, hard-working, rough-riding, mean-fighting men, is on a short road to the end, because another nation will have such ruffians, such roughshod and dangerous creatures, against whom you will have no defense. Now, we have a world. America's not the only one guilty of it. In fact, we may be coming late to the party at this point and just starting to suffer. We have a world where the younger generation, the millennial as he's called, these kids 30 years and younger, well, they're not full of men anymore. Instead, they're full of these sloppy, fluffy, androgynous little amoeboids who lack the tenacity and the intellectual capacity to form complex argument or to engage in legitimate competitive conflict, who have grown up with participation trophies. And just look at our political history. The election of Barack Obama and the award of his Nobel Peace Prize. We have effectively relegated the world's most powerful office and the most prestigious and well-known trophy on the planet to a mere participation award. Oh, I mean, good old Barry O, he got a Nobel Peace Prize for showing up. So what we're going to be talking about is how those institutions are faltering and failing. And among the topics that I want to cover in that, part of the fault of the sexual revolution and this whole concept of slut shaming, the idea that it's not okay to choose to not be promiscuous. You know, it's maybe you don't have to go out there and call a whore. Her life's hard enough. But at the same time, that life doesn't need to be glorified. That life doesn't need to be something that you don't put that on a pedestal. Sexual promiscuity, it's dangerous. Let's be real. I mean, I was no saint, sure, but that was when I was young and dumb. You know, you get older, you get smarter, and if you're not a little bit careful about it, you get sick and die. It's dangerous, and that contributes to the breakdown of the household. The lack of a mommy and daddy in a household. Babies need a mommy and a daddy. Now, you can bring to me all day the idea that a gay couple raising an adopted child can raise a healthy and adjusted child. I'll give you a maybe on that one, but at a minimum, I would say that at least that household has two parents, and those two parents likely fill each of the two very, very important roles: a nurturer and a disciplinarian, a homemaker and a wage earner. Sure, the homemaker can be the disciplinarian. I guess that suits. I think it's kind of foolish. A homemaker who has a disciplinarian that is functionally absent during the working hours has the power of the threat, so that the child doesn't have to be presented constantly with the presence of the threat. You wait till your daddy gets home. When daddy came home wearing a heavy belt that you didn't want him to snap off, that shit was scary, and that helps keep you in line. And children need to learn. Children who need to learn have not yet learned how to learn. I won't even go so far as to say that there is a fine line between physical discipline and abuse. I think there's an ocean there. But spankings work. Thumping the knuckles works. When you got a kid whose English hasn't developed yet because he's 15 months old, but he can reach the hot burner on the eye, I'd sure as hell rather put a pink spot on the back of his hand, flicking him like that as he's reaching for it, than let him grab on and learn the hard way that burns. See, the loss of these rites of passage, the loss of these tribal activities, has taken away learning that the stove is hot. Well, don't touch it because it's hot. That's a big part of what makes a person functionable and survivable. Now, Cade and I were talking earlier about this, and he mentioned some interesting trends with a particular African tribe that I'd like to go ahead and pop you in, Cade, and get you to elaborate on one of those for me.
Mute or no?
You
can hear me?
Live. Go for it.
Okay. All right. What I want to do before I get into that, the funny thing is when we were talking earlier, what I was reading, actually, it was the next paragraph that talked about the particular tribe. And it's an Aboriginal tribe in Australia and not African, so I was incorrect there. What I would like to do, though, is I would like to read Joseph Campbell's definition and example, if you would be so kind, of rites of passage. This is from the Hero with a Thousand Faces. Now, the interesting thing about this book is that it was written in 1949, and you'll find some pretty relevant things that I would not have thought would be in a book that came a mere 4 years after World War II. But I'll get to that in a second. What he says is to consider the numerous strange rituals that have been reported from primitive tribes and great civilizations of the past. It becomes apparent that the purpose and actual effect of these was to conduct people across those difficult thresholds of transformation that demanded a change in the patterns not only of conscious but also of unconscious life. The so-called rites of passage, which occupy such a prominent place in the life of a primitive society, ceremonials of birth, naming, puberty, marriage, burial, etc., what we're talking about would be puberty, are distinguished by formal and usually very severe exercises of severance, whereby the mind is radically cut away from the attitudes, attachments, and life patterns of the stage being left behind. Then follows an interval of more or less extended retirement, during which are enacted rituals designed to introduce the life adventurer to the forms and proper feelings of his new estate, so that when, at last, the time has ripened for the return of the normal world, the initiate will be as good as reborn. So that's in a nutshell. Now, this particular one, we'll skip ahead a second here. Among the Aborigines of Australia, for example, one of the principal features of the ordeal of initiation, by which the boy at puberty is cut away from the mother and inducted into the society and secret lore of the men, is the rite of circumcision. When a little boy of the Murngin tribe, Murngin, is about to be circumcised, he is told by his fathers and by the old men, "The great father snake smells your foreskin. He is calling for it." The boys believe this to be literally true and become extremely frightened. Usually, they take refuge with their mother's mother, or some other favorite female relative, for they know that the men are organized to see that they are taken to the men's ground where the great snake is bellowing. The women wail over the boys ceremonially. This is to keep the great snake from swallowing them. Now regard the counterpart from the unconscious. One of my patients, writes Carl Jung, dreamt that a snake shot out of a cave and bit him in the genital region. This dream occurred at the moment when the patient was convinced of the truth of the analysis and was beginning to free himself from the bonds of his mother complex. I won't go any further for this particular one because this is from a chapter called Myth and Dream. And basically what he gets into here is that if we as a society do not provide the rites of passage, they will be provided for us by what is genetically within us, what is in our psyche, what has been handed down over millennia. And dreams are one of the first things that's mentioned in this book as being the thing what takes place that makes up for a lack of a right in that particular instance. Chris, talk for a second. I'm going to find... No, you know what? Give me 1 second. Let me just say this real quick. We remain fixated to the unexercised images of infancy and hence disinclined to the necessary passages of our adulthood. Now remember, keep in mind, 1949. In the United States, there is even... lost my place. There is even a pathos of inverted emphasis. The goal is not to grow old, but to remain young. Not to mature away from the mother, but to cleave to her. And so, while husbands are worshiping at their boyhood shrines, being the lawyers, merchants, or masterminds their parents wanted them to be, their wives, even after 14 years of marriage and 2 fine children produced and raised, are still on the search for love, which can come to them only from the centaurs, Selene, satyrs, and other concupiscent incubi, I do not know what that word means, of the route of Pan, either as in the second of the above recited dreams, so forth and so on. But I thought that was very interesting with, Chris, what we were talking about earlier with the Western world and the decline of the rights in the Western world. For 1949, I would have thought that is a time when we think of this was the greatest generation. This was the heyday of the greatest generation, so-called. At that time, I think of men still being men in every way, and society still being as it was set up. But apparently there was enough of this decline already present in the time just before our parents. This is our grandparents' generation at 34 and 35 years old, was already starting to show signs of this clinging to our adolescence for the sake of our own comfort.
So what you're getting at there is even as early as World War II, and honestly, if you look at it, you'll find that it's been a trend that people have been worried about for some time. Oh, that rock and roll music, and all that stuff that we find to be so funny. As far as oh, if the music's too loud, you're getting too old. Beatniks, Rod mentions. The thing about kind of predicting that downfall, like we've talked on this show before, life is living is an activity. One does not simply be alive. You don't just sit down and survive. At a bare minimum, you have to eat. You have to rest. And for the line to continue, you have to propagate. If you don't consume, you will die. So, at some point, living simply being alive requires activity, requires you to get up and go, and at a minimum, acquire, if not produce. Now, obviously, production is preferable because consumption without production, the parasite dies when the host dies. So obviously, production is preferable to straight consumption, straight acquisition. And that can take us off on this whole tangent about the importance of commerce. That I want to try and stay away from that. I want to stay focused on this task at hand. So even as early as World War II, like you said, Cade, there's this concern that our children will not be as strong as we are. Well, that's only going to be true if, as men, we allow it to become true. You can, in the absence of these rites of passage, which were part of the tribe, and even, hey, America is your tribe. Your religion is a tribe. Your ethnicity is a tribe. That is a group with which you identify with, whether you like to or not. And racism aside, whatever political correctness bullshit you want to use to try and stifle the generation and the growth and propagation of strong men who will continue to build the world and the roads and bridges that you so love to drive on. One must be concerned with our having that human capital available to do that work that's necessary. And if you look from culture to culture, among Americans, there are differences in the way we comport ourselves. A traditional, mostly black wedding, for example, many of them still jump the broom. You go to a white wedding, and we don't jump the broom anymore. I mean, hell, my wedding we had it at the lake house. It was fantastic. We didn't jump no broom. We did have a red velvet armadillo cake. Now that's class right there, son. But anyway, I digress. Like Cade mentioned, if these rites of passage are not coming from the tribe or from the family or from the father, young men will have rites of passage. They will have that experience.
They have to.
Yes. They cannot continue their life without it. They are psychologically incapable of persisting in its absence. And that is why young, fatherless, poor boys in American ghettos go to gangs. There's a rite of passage. There's a tribe which will give them a rite of passage, ready-made. And now they become men. They become strong. They become fierce. They get that warrior mentality. They get that hunter in them. But they get it wrong. They get it from a place where, as a society, we don't want them to get that from. Our greater tribe, Americans, suffers from having that rite of passage administered by splinter sub-tribes within it. So letting them go off, if you don't talk to your kids about herpetology, who will? If you don't sit down and tell your kids the difference between a tortoise and a turtle, they'll learn it on the street. Same thing, you don't talk to your children about drugs, you don't talk to them about sex, you don't talk to them about guns, you don't talk to them about whatever. You don't talk to them about economics, about what it means to balance a checkbook, about what it means to have a job and earn wages, what it means when you vote this way or when you vote that way, what that means to the way that the world develops. If you don't have that conversation with them, someone will. I'm going to go ahead and pull the leash off of Rod and Cameron and see if I can get something out of the two of them. I know you've been sitting there quietly and listening to me ramble. Thoughts?
Oh, I've been thinking.
I imagine you have.
I've been thinking about
that brain pushing your scalp line up over top of your hairline. It's pushing.
Well, I have to reach way back here to cut my bangs. I've been thinking about the time machine and the Morlocks and the Eloi.
Morlocks and Eloi?
That's right. Now, the Morlocks didn't need Eloi being manly men, right? That's not what they wanted. They wanted a nice, placid, flaccid, whatever group of folks that they could just do what they wanted to do with. You see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, because people that can fight back are a pain in the ass.
Well, they can be a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
Now, and I got to look in, there's all kinds of different rites of passage. There's toilet training. Yeah, that's a good one. The bar mitzvah.
It will be in my house when me and the boy just walk out in the yard to water the trees. Let the neighbors ask questions.
Yeah, the debutante ball. That's my personal favorite. I want to hang out with I want to go to the prom. No, I didn't go to the prom. Riding a bicycle, 10-punt BB gun. There you go. That was mine right there. I found a BB gun and I was on it. You see what I'm saying? And then you got your first wedding, your second wedding, and your third wedding. The society's being programmed more than anything else. It's not these kids' fault that they're turning out to be wussies. You see what I'm saying?
No, it requires no. It's lazy. Our religions in the West, we're lazy. The religions are lazy. You don't have to sacrifice anything. You don't have to do anything. There's nothing but ceremony. You mentioned bar mitzvah. It's a ceremony. It doesn't mean anything except ceremonial. It's all superficial. It doesn't actually have a deeper resonance to it, like it used to. And with the advent of these rites in the past, they had something you had to do, something you had to give up in order to move into adulthood, some responsibility you had to take on in order to move into adulthood.
They were showing that they knew how to read and write.
Yeah, but I mean, with that line of thinking, learning to swim is a right. Riding a bike is a right, and these are vanilla rights compared to the ones that actually had flavor and substance.
I don't know if I had to, Kate, I'm sorry, if I had to pick between not being able to swim and not being able to read, I mean, I'd pick swimming. I need to be able to read, man.
Yeah.
That's
No,
part
but
of the civilized world.
that's a societal right, and by societal, I know that sounds redundant because we are talking about tribal, but it's something to conform and to play your part in society, which is very important. But it's not that tribal centric type of right that is more beneficial to your own community, to something beyond your family, but not as great as your nation, so to speak. And that's one of the things that's missing because we are mutts in America. The flavors of our ancestry are all but washed away. They're all washed out. They're watered down, and we don't know who the hell we are for the most part. We've developed our own regional things. You know, I mean, we're Southern. We're very much in the deep South. We very much have pride and a lot of pluck and a lot of that resentment over being looked down upon, trod upon. That our Scottish ancestors, our Irish and Scots-Irish ancestors had, and that comes directly from the people who fought to free our country. But it's Chris and I. Go ahead, Rod.
Well, freeing our country from what? You know, I mean, I'm not going to say that the Republican form of government is the best one in the world, but it's probably better than a monarchy. But you know, I mean, this thing started out crooked. You know, the first time I read the Constitution, it had slavery in it. I mean, and they didn't know better than that back then. Well, yeah, some of them knew better. You know, but we're talking about rights and stuff like that, right?
Well, Civil War was predicted as before the Revolutionary War took place. Well, there were already rumblings of that happening in the future around slavery.
But we're talking about folks knowing better. There's your rite of passage. Do you know better?
And do you do anything about it?
I would argue that as a country, we did do something about it. We did have the Civil War, and part of the reason why we had the Civil War was because of the things that were written in the Constitution. And it's important to note that one of the things that happened as a result of the Civil War is the Constitution was amended to specifically say that.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and thousands, hundreds of thousands of guys died to end slavery. I mean, that's a price to pay right there. You know, I don't know how many times you got to pay the price once the price has already been paid. But
I don't know. I think it's really difficult to be that critical of our country and its history, because when our country was founded, I mean, slaves were just a thing. The entire world over, there were slaves on all the way up to the 1900s. And honestly, even now, if you look at certain Middle Eastern and North African nations, there are still slaves. So to act like what we did in America as though we're these big, massive hypocrites, I think that's too narrow of a view. We very quickly purged this sin from our system, where there are countries that are literally thousands of years old that still have it going on.
We're hypocrites of civility, though. We're hypocrites of morals and ethics. And that's something. Rod, say your piece, because I want to get into the word civilization here in just a second.
Well, I mean, all you guys are from Georgia, and you had to study the Yazoo problem, right? You know, they set this thing up so that they could loot. You see what I'm saying? We've had all these same problems all these years at the trough, the government trough, and the government land. And, they want to privatize this, sell us this land for pennies on the dollar, and all that. And we don't have a leadership class that's mature. Their rite of passage is, something special. What they've got to do in order to become the good politician. There's one for you. You know, it's a study in dishonesty.
I think the big difference between now and
join a fraternity and get their little asses paddled by the boys and slide down the banister with their booze in hand. Try not to catch too many ping pong balls to the nuts while they're hanging around the beer pong table. Yeah, tell you what, those boys up in Washington, they work it real hard.
They ready.
I think the difference between now and then is we used to have more rites of passage for becoming a man as part of our Americana. There were just things you used to do, like buy your own car or buy your own house or whatever, these things that you would do that you took pride in. You tried to get married. You tried to have a family. You tried to get promoted at work and so forth and so on. And that's just not part of the mentality of a lot of the kids today. And I really think it goes all the way back to kindergarten. And, I mean, you want to talk about a rite of passage. What about your first fight? Every guy I know, even if he says, I've only ever been in one fight, has been in a fight. Even if he was just in that one fight and he got his ass whipped, every guy I know has been in at least one fight. So what happens now in school? Well, in school, if you get into a fight, even if the other person starts it, is what the police refer to as the primary aggressor, and you are clearly defending yourself, you are still punished and suspended because you're not supposed to fight. Instead, what you're supposed to do is take whatever punishment you get and then go report the offender to the authorities. So we start the emasculation process from the beginning. There are all these small and medium-sized rites of passage that get ignored. And, Cade, you were talking about this has been around since 1949. I would tell you that this sort of mentality has actually been around since before that, since the rise of the Fabian socialists and, Bernays and Shaw and all these other people that came out of that movement.
I was alarmed that people were recognizing it in 1949. Not that it had to have been around for. Joseph Campbell would have been born at the turn of the century. He would have noticed those things growing up himself. So yeah, I was surprised at how early that it was being recognized, and that indicates to me that I would be even more surprised at whoever the first one to write about it was.
Well, I was born in 1963, which is probably 30 years before y'all were born.
Roughly.
Roughly.
20.
Okay, 20. By the time I was in the first grade, they were doing that kind of crap to me. I was not the bully. I wasn't the aggressor. But they were real upset if I defended myself. They just didn't like that worth nothing. That was just not something they weren't going to put up with that. I would get in more trouble than the bully for fighting back. Now these kids are running into things where you might as well throw your hands up in the air and say it's just futile to try and function when nobody has had the ethics and morals inculcated into their system. You understand?
That's how I ended up in a Christian school, which I subsequently got expelled from. I had to leave Edwards Middle School because in 8th grade I finally stopped listening to my turn the other cheek mother, and I started listening to my beat their ass father, who said, "Listen, son, you're 3 inches taller than and 40 pounds heavier than any of these boys there." And at that time, it wasn't all pure fat. He said, "Stick up for yourself, beat their asses." And in 8th grade, that's exactly what I did. I went back in, and I was not picked on one single time without throwing my weight behind my fist. And at some point, I was told if I got in one more fight, I was going to be expelled. And they pulled me out of that school and put me in a Christian school, where I was for 4 years. But what you're talking about, Cameron and Rod, about these fights, yes, it happens, and it is what it is. It's a pilot light in these rites of passage. It really depends on what happens to that flame. Depends on how Daddy responds to the fight. Does Daddy say, when you get home and you've got a black eye and you've got a letter from your teacher, does Daddy say, you're in big trouble now, you don't raise your hand to someone else, or does he say, good for you, let me teach you how to perfect that right hook? There is no wrong answer.
Well, yes, there is. Black Lives Matter has figured out what the wrong answer is.
Do
Well,
what?
yeah, there's definitely a wrong answer.
There's
The
definitely
wrong answer is
the wrong answer is when you go after somebody that's innocent that ain't done nothing to you, right?
Right, but what I'm talking about...
You remember in Pink Floyd when the schoolkeeper's wife turned into a puppet, and the schoolmaster was a puppet, and then the school child was a puppet, and the school child was probably kicking the dog. Right. One string got pulled, and it caused a foot to kick an ass, to kick another ass, to kick another ass. And nobody's kicking the ass, it's kicking them. They're not going to go and whoop up on the one that's just whooped their butt. They're going to go find somebody weaker than them, rather than going after the folks that just came and got them. They're going to go get somebody that's innocent. They ain't done nobody no wrong. And just spread it around, So like that's part of the thought virus kind of crap.
Well, this is what I was getting at, though. The reason I said that is because what the thing that I wanted to mention earlier, the word civilization, the word civil. We are and have been for many centuries. You could almost argue anything Anno Domini, for that matter. We have been in a transition period between our primitive animalistic selves and the ultimate civil utopia wherein everyone behaves, follows a set of rules, and contributes to society evenly, the kind of stuff that the communists jumped on because, of course, yeah, you can be successful when you're running the entire show and everyone else is just is a little pawn, is a little wheel in a machine. But anyway, what made me think of that was Chris talking about the gang initiations in the inner cities with a lot of the fatherless young men. And you said that they're learning it the wrong way. They're having their rites of passage in the wrong way. I would argue that that's not true. They're not wrong with what they're doing. What they're doing is the base primitive animalistic right that is in every other species except for us, including our closest relatives, the ape. It is in every other species on Earth. It is survival of the fittest. It is kill or be killed. There's actually, they're using their cleverness and their strength and their ingenuity and their strength and unity to bully people out of things in order to provide for them, in order to better themselves. They take it from someone else by force. There's nothing wrong with that in the laws that nature does not have. Where it conflicts with us is as a society, as a civilization, we have certain laws that separate us from the ape, that separate us from the animal kingdom. And we have to live within these laws, or we as a civilization cannot thrive. We are wasting our abilities to reason and to use logic and to further progress. So where we are in this transition is there's civility and there is animalism, and civility and primitivism. And it's all sprinkled in together, and it has been for many hundreds of years. But as we inch closer to full civility, which will not happen in any of our lifetimes or our children's, or ever for that matter, we run into more of, you've got the father saying, we will never get anywhere, son, unless you learn to bend people to your will without using your fist. And then you have the other father who says, you beat their ass until they bend to your will. Both are right, and both are wrong. You understand what I'm
No,
saying?
I'm sorry.
You
There
don't have
are
to
times.
apologize for disagreeing with me.
Well, no, I'm about to vociferously disagree with you. I think
Have
there
at
are
it, brother.
times. I think I can really sum it up in just a simple statement. There are times when only violence solves the problem.
Yes.
When you get down to the bottom of it, there's. It,
I thought you
only
were going to
violence
disagree
can-
with me, not jump ahead of me.
Well, I didn't realize
was-
you were getting there.
I was
It just.
getting, Cameron, I take a snail's pace on a rabbit's trail to get where I'm going. All right, so let me say this: there was a time, and I can say this because I know none of my in-laws watch this. There was a time. Caroline, my wife, has a brother who's always been a problem. He's always caused issues, and he has several just issues. I won't get into all of them, but anyway,
Issues.
he said they come from a very passive family. They come from a family that doesn't talk through problems. They ignore them and they move on, and they feel that that's the way a family operates. In order to keep the family unit together, you forgive and you move on. I don't come from that background. I don't fit into that. I believe in fixing a problem so that it does not happen again. So at some point, her brother said something to her that made me angry enough that I cussed him out and punched him. Now, no, I was basically shunned, passively shunned, because that's how they do. From that, kind of just ignored like I wasn't there from that side of the family for a good year and a half, because no one wanted to talk about it, no one wanted to deal with it, and I was over there going, but I solved the problem. He hasn't talked to her that way since. He acted like an animal, and the only way to stop an animal from doing something is to treat them like an animal, is to respond like an animal. Punching him in his effing face was the only way to stop that issue, and it worked. It's not the way I prefer to stop issues, but it worked. And it has worked, and have not had an issue out of him as it pertains to Caroline specifically since then, and that was 7 years ago. So yes, I don't disagree with you at all. That's why I said they're both right, but they're both wrong. It is all very much situational, and it's also why I said we'll never ever have that civilization, that liberal utopia that we see where everyone is, good morning, sir, how are you? I'm fine, and you? Great. Let's trade. All right, we'll do some trading today, and we'll both be the better for it. Have a wonderful day. That will never ever happen. It won't
All right,
happen.
let me nerd out a little bit on it then. You're talking about that future utopia, dystopia. Let me bring that around and we'll nerd out a little bit. Remember Demolition Man? So
Enhance your calm.
that's what happened. That's how it went down in the film.
Is this Sly Stallone?
Yeah,
Yes.
Sly Stallone.
I never
Snipes.
actually saw it. I'm aware of it, but I've never seen it.
Oh, Kate, you gotta say it's hilarious. So Stallone and who was it? Who was it? Snipes?
Wesley Snipes.
Yeah, Stallone and Snipes. Light your ass on fire.
Yeah.
They get frozen, and they end up in the future. And it's a future that is so PC. Nobody physically has sex anymore. That's all handled with virtual reality. The idea of exchanging bodily fluids has become repulsive to most people.
Sheldon
It's a
Cooper?
crime to swear.
It is a crime to use vulgarity. There's this great scene where Stallone comes out of the bathroom and he says, "Y'all don't have any toilet paper in there." And a couple of people look at each other like, "He doesn't know how to use the 3 seashells." And they never explain what the 3 seashells are. They just laugh at him because he doesn't know how to use it. And he walks over to the little automatic ticket dispenser and says, "Screw you, you stupid ball breeding." And he just starts swearing. at the ticket dispenser, and it starts spitting out these tickets and saying, "You have been fined $100 for using. You have been fined one," and it doesn't even finish saying the sentence. You have been fined for using foul language or whatever. And he runs off about 8 or 10 tickets, and ultimately it goes back into the bathroom. Well, that movie is the badass super cop that always burned the building down trying to get the super bad guy, and the super bad guy end up in a future where it's so PC, so polite, people don't touch. They hold their hands up like this and wave them at each other and say, "Mellow greetings." Right? And the police don't even carry firearms. They carry weapons they carry these things called six sticks. It's like a billy club that they'll tap
It's
somebody.
like a stun gun on a stick.
Yeah, it's a stun gun on a stick that makes you vomit when they hit you with it. Well,
That's effective.
so all of a sudden you have a monster loose on the world, and no one's prepared to deal with it. And that is the problem that we're talking about here. The pussification of the American man. Turning them into these squishy little androgynoids.
Oh,
Well, when you don't have to move out of your parents' house and you don't have to get a job and you don't have to pay your own bills and so forth and so on and la la la, why be a man? The human beings are sort of like lightning. They're full of power, but they are going to take the easiest path available to them, generally speaking. We have to be taught the value in doing something outside of yourself, getting outside your comfort zone, however you want to put it. Left to our own devices, we'd be like the rat pushing the lever to get another pellet. If all I have to do is do this thing and I get more food, well, I'm going to keep doing that thing and keep getting more food. We've got about 93 million people in this country that don't work. But damn, if they don't all eat, if they don't all sleep somewhere warm in the wintertime.
now, the way people used to say it is they would try and get you to stay at home until you got married. They try and stay at home, live with us, save up your money so you'll have a down payment on a house, right?
Right.
That's how it went. It's programming. This whole thing about, well, you're 18 and now to prove that you're a rite of passage, is you got to go out and you got to start working real hard and spend all this money and become a nice little corporate slave. You see what I'm saying? There's that little side of this equation.
I owe my soul to the company store.
I've been talking about Democrats all week. I'm not going to say exactly what I've been saying all week, but, they ruled the South for 100 years, and the system they set up was economic slavery with sharecropping, right? And so what's your rite of passage there? You turn 18 years old, and what do you do? Well, if they did it right, then you won't have enough reading skills to be able to go join the Army or the Navy or the Marine Corps, so you can't escape from them, right? And so you too will be stuck sharecropping. You see what I'm saying? There's another. We could bifurcate this thing, right? It kind of splits. And that's the reason I was talking about the Morlocks and Eloi to begin with. See what I'm saying? It's so deeply you're too sorry to work, right? That's what people say. You're too sorry to work.
I don't hear people saying that, and that's certainly not what I find myself thinking. What I find myself thinking more often than not is, I wish your sorry ass would go to work. I don't meet many people that don't have the ability, that don't eventually put it to work, or that don't want to put their ability to work And I guess what I'm trying to say is, if somebody wants to go out and do more, they usually do, even if it takes them a few tries to get there.
Well, here's the
What you see more and more of now is, I mean, man, and I see them doing the job I do. Dozens of men standing on the corner. They've all got big old bellies, but I don't ever see any of them working.
True. But for most people, these millennials that we're talking about aren't cats that are hanging out in front of the liquor store. You see what I'm saying? You know.
No, but they
Not yet,
they
but you got to have goals.
Yeah, exactly. They're still hanging out in mom's basement playing Warcraft. Or their name starts with a Y, and they troll people's Facebook posts to say things that they think are smart that are not actually very smart.
I blocked that son of a bitch first time I had to deal with him. Yanker. Just.
I'm just saying that it starts very young. All these different rites of passage are eliminated, and it's been done for a long time, and it's taken over a century, I think, for it to really take hold. But
But what I'm saying is that you've got to do stuff that's in your own best interest. And you're supposed to do this, X, Y, and Z, social norms, social expectations. Most of that crap that they got set up now for these kids to try and follow, it's not in their best interest. They know it.
Yeah, going $50,000 in debt to get a 4-year degree is not in your best interest.
Well, what's the guy that was
Like that cartoon that I sent you guys.
who's that dude that ran the show about the ugly, nasty jobs, dirty jobs? What's his name?
Mike Rowe.
Yeah, he's sitting there saying all these kids are getting these $50,000 a year degrees, and there's not enough jobs for them. Right? 20% of the jobs require college, and 80% of them require dirt.
Well, at the same time, the industries that don't require that college degree, like you can go be somebody's helper as an electrician, as a plumber, as an HVAC guy, no education required. You know, if you can read, obviously some education, no college required. You can read, write, and arithmetic. Shit, they'll teach you trigonometry to get you bending pipe to run wire and to be an electrician. That's what I did before I was in the Army. I was an industrial electrician. I walked off my first job site as an electrician. I didn't even have my own damn tools. The company I worked for sold them to me as I worked and took it out of my paycheck. And that's how I got my first skilled trade. I learned how to be an electrician, and that took me all over the state of Georgia, building restaurants and paper mills and oil refineries and all kind of shit. It was good work.
Well, there's another rite of passage we don't have anymore.
Yes.
It used to be a thing. We would take a young man and we'd go, okay, which one of these things do you want to do? And he'd go, oh, well, I want to be a blacksmith, or I want to be a carpenter, or whatever. And he'd say, okay, well, you're going to work for your food, and you're going to sleep underneath the forge in this little basement apartment, or whatever. But, hey, you learned how to do it, and you were a productive member of society. That, in and of itself, is something that is a rite of passage that is lost. The internship, the whatever the modern-day equivalent is something that is not done anymore.
Well, my view on it is this. Look, over next to me in the picture here is Mr. Hank. He taught me how to do title research, right? And there were ethics and standards, and you had to read the Fender book and other books, and there was a whole lot of learning going on. And the next thing you know, I'm over here teaching this ogre fella how to do it. You see what I'm saying? And it gets passed down, passed across. I don't know when you do the electrician stuff, but at one point in time, you spent about a year with me learning how to play with deeds and whatnot.
Yep.
And, we did it the fast way, as fast as we could do it.
Slamology. We call it slamology.
And then we got you. We carried you. I even went to the job interview. Did it go down? What's his name?
And that didn't go too good. All right, so yeah.
Henderson. That was his Henderson. He was like, "You giving up your trainee?" I was like, "Well, I'm going on to something else."
I don't. Was that his name, Henderson?
Yeah. The short film.
Yeah, I ran title for him for a couple of months, and then I had to walk away from those guys. I had to fire those sons of bitches.
Guys, I have to call it.
Yeah, it's about time for us to call it a night, guys. I think we've had this. I think this has actually been one of our better shows. Had an excellent discussion. I believe we may come back and revisit this topic at a later time and maybe do one of our special treatments on it. Thanks for showing up. We actually were up to 5 viewers for a little bit there. And while you guys were talking these last several minutes, a few of our viewers have been chatting with me on Facebook. So thanks for watching the show, guys. It was great to have you, Angie. Nice. I'm glad you stopped and watched the show. Not that Angie, boys, don't. But it's been a good show. We had a good conversation. Thanks for coming out, guys. And so we'll see y'all next week. Make sure you find us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, like the page, donate to Patreon, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Look for us next week at 2100 on a Friday night.
And
My name is
witness!
Christopher Lowry. This has been the Brushfire Mind. Witness! And remember, if you build a man a fire, you'll keep him warm for the evening. But if you set a man on fire, he'll be warm for the rest of his life. Good night.
Good night.